I made the mistake of sending a risky message several drinks deep on a Saturday night. An ex I dated for 3 years. Claire was recently divorced, and I'd been trying to work up the courage to reach out. Instead of doing this in a pre-planned, calculated way, I pulled the Hail Mary of randomly messaging and asking how she'd been. I immediately regretted my choice, panicking as I heard my phone chime. Surprisingly, her response was positive. She let me know she'd been better, but was doing all right. She seemed open to having a conversation, and we continued to text until I passed out early in the morning. The next day, I woke up with my head pounding and feeling dehydrated. I quickly remembered having a conversation with Claire, but couldn't recall the details. I looked at my messages. I felt embarrassed at how much I stumbled over my words. It was clear I was nervous about talking to her again. In my drunken state, I actually worked up the courage to ask her out. Surprisingly, she agreed, and we were to meet at a local trail that night around 7. I did remember her being pretty outdoorsy, so this suggestion made sense. Although I wasn't looking forward to a hike in the heat while hungover, I was very much looking forward to reconnecting with Claire. I knew she hadn't been divorced for long, so I wasn't sure what she was looking for. But I was glad I was at least getting a chance to see her again after all these years. I met up with Claire at the trail as planned. I recognized her silver Honda immediately. She stepped out wearing a pair of cargo shorts and hiking boots, despite it being 5 years since I saw her last. She didn't look a day over 20. Her shoulder-length blonde hair looked as bright as ever, and her green eyes lit up the room, just like I remembered. "Hey, Aiden," said Claire, giving me a hug. I didn't have liquid courage backing me up anymore, so I was extremely nervous. We began walking, and luckily, the conversation was easy. Claire didn't talk much about her ex-husband. Thankfully, she seemed to be enjoying her post-divorce life. She recently moved to a townhouse and got a new dog, a yellow lab named Baxter. She also told me she left nursing to pursue graphic design like she always wanted. I remembered the arguments with her family when she started college. They put a lot of pressure on her to go into the medical field instead of anything creative. "I'm glad you're finally doing what's right for you," I told her. Claire nodded. At some point, the conversation shifted to heavier topics, particularly her brother's overdose a few years ago. I apologized to her for not attending the funeral. She was very understanding. We settled into a comfortable silence, taking in the scenery. The landscape of the trail was a beautiful mix of woods and prairie. "When do you want to start heading back?" I asked. It was almost 8 now and would be getting dark soon. Claire didn't respond. I wondered if she heard me. I figured she'd tell me when she was ready, and I wanted to spend as much time with her as possible, so I didn't ask again. I noticed we were past the parts of the trail I was familiar with. The trail led us over a hill. When we got to the other side, I noticed the landscape looked different. Despite being in Ohio, it looked like a Washington state park. Dramatic, tall pine trees lined the landscape, some covered in moss. The tree line was so dense that we were comfortably covered in shade. I paused and looked around. Claire kept up her usual pace, barely seeming to notice. I was surprised because I had never heard how scenic this part of the trail was. "Damn, this is incredible," I commented, hoping to start a conversation. Me and Claire actually talked about taking a trip to Washington many times during our relationship, but never took the plunge. I was always really sad that we never got the chance to go. I thought about going on a road trip with friends, but it felt strange to go without her. Claire nodded and continued walking. I paused to take some pictures. Claire didn't stop to wait for me or even slow down. This kind of annoyed me, but I caught up to her, eager to see more of this section of the trail. We continued waking in silence. The beautiful tree line continued for a good 15 minutes, then seemed to gradually revert back to the normal Ohio landscape. I didn't know what to say at this point. It was clear that Claire didn't want to talk right now. Yet, she also didn't seem interested in concluding the hike either. I didn't like the mixed signals. I decided to give her some time before trying to start a conversation. The trees and tall prairie grass seemed to gradually thin out. As we continued down the trail, the ground beneath appeared dry and cracked. Eventually, we reached an area that looked like a barren desert landscape. There were even cacti, which, as anyone in the Midwest knows, don't grow here naturally. "What the hell?" I whispered. I finally broke the silence. "Did you know this was here?" I asked Claire. "I didn't, but it reminds me of our trip to Arizona," she said, smiling. I thought back to the trip, smiling to myself. We took the trip last year together. Even though we were on the rocks at that point, we got along great during the trip, and I thought it would be like a new beginning. Unfortunately, things didn't stay the same once we returned home. I snapped back into reality. I didn't understand how a landscape could change so rapidly. How were plants in a desert climate even able to survive here? Lair was barely reacting to our strange surroundings. I started to worry about her. She seemed disinterested. I worried that maybe this was too much for her. It wasn't long after her divorce, after all. It also wasn't like she was reconnecting with an old fling. We dated long-term and had a messy breakup. I couldn't even remember the details of what that final argument was about. All I remember clearly is watching her leave and feeling more powerless than I have in my entire life. Eventually, the desert-like landscape gave way to the Ohio landscape I was more familiar with. I stopped for a moment to try to look up the trail to see how far it went. I tried for several minutes, but was unable to get cell service. By the time I looked up, Claire was so far ahead that I couldn't see her. I was annoyed at this point. Why would she just ignore me when she agreed to come here with me? It was also getting dark at this point, and I was ready to call it a night. I quickly headed up the trail to find Claire. There was a large pond with some trees and a bench surrounding it. The path appeared to end here. "Claire!" I yelled, looking around. Claire snuck up behind me, causing me to jump. "What the? Wanna get in?" she asked, winking. I couldn't believe my luck. Maybe this date is turning around. I stripped down to my boxers and followed her into the water. We kissed again. Claire then went underwater. I waited, and she didn't come back up. I could barely see since it was almost dark now. I tried to feel around in the water for Claire. I couldn't find her. I began to panic. I held my breath and went underwater. I couldn't see, but as I swam around, I felt something touch me. I reached out and felt a hand grab onto mine. It must be Claire. I was trying to lead her to the surface when I realized the hand was pulling me downward. I pulled it up, but was immediately yanked back down. The grip on my hand tightened. I struggled to get free, almost breathing in the water. Then I heard a strange noise through the water. It almost sounded like hissing, or maybe growling. My arm flew up as I shot up to the surface in fear. Something grazed my back, and I jumped. I turned around to see a human arm, decaying and detached from the body. It even had a bone sticking out of the end. I screamed and ran out of the water, falling and tripping over rocks. I began hyperventilating. I called out for Claire several times, but got no response. Had that creepy thing in the water gotten her? I found my phone and dialed 911. Surprisingly, I got a signal. I frantically talked to the operator, begging them to get someone out here as soon as possible. Officers and an ambulance arrived soon after. The first officer who arrived on scene asked for my ID, and I showed it to him. He glanced at it, then back at me. He asked me if I could come with him to the station to answer some questions. I didn't know how to tell him what happened without sounding out of my mind. I was happy to help, but wanted to know if Claire was okay first. He was honest with me, saying he couldn't give me an answer yet, but would tell me as soon as he knew. I rode with him back to the station, and he stepped out for a few minutes to take a call. His facial expression was noticeably different when he returned. "How did you know Claire?" he asked. I explained to him that we dated our senior year of high school and the first 2 years after. He asked why we broke up. I sat and thought for a moment. Embarrassingly enough, I couldn't remember the exact reason. Just that we grew apart. I told him that. He nodded. Did she talk to you at all about her divorce? He asked. I shrugged. Not really. I didn't think it was my place to ask. Maybe she was still in love with me. I joked. The officer didn't seem to think it was funny. I apologized. The officer asked some strained questions, like where I grew up and what I did for work. Finally, I got frustrated and stopped him. Did they find Claire? I asked. The officer sighed and began talking. Trevor, Claire's been missing for days now. Her high school ex, Aiden, was found dead in his apartment a few hours ago, but his phone, wallet, and several other items were missing. It appeared to be a robbery. But then we found out you made threats to him several months ago. You and Claire were divorcing, and you assumed it was because she was still in love with him. Phone records show that messages went to Claire from Aiden's phone at a time that was after his death. You lured Claire out to the trail, murdered her, and tossed her body in the pond. For whatever reason, you dressed up in some of Aiden's clothes tonight and called us as him. You must be feeling guilty. Why don't you go ahead and just tell me what happened? I started shaking. The officer told me to think back a few days, and I did. I was drinking. I was alone. I looked at Claire's profile from a fake account I made. She blocked me immediately after our divorce was finalized. She posted a gorgeous selfie. Tons of thirsty, pathetic guys liked it. I clicked to see the names. Aiden, of course, knew she still had feelings for him. Sometimes I didn't blame her. It's hard to lose feelings for an old flame. That said, I hated hearing about him. When we were moving into our marital home, I found some hand-painted terracotta pots in one of her boxes. She snatched them away from me as I unpacked them. I kept asking where they were from, and she finally caved. Apparently, she and Aiden painted them during their trip to Arizona. Why she would insult me by still having them, I don't know. Sitting at home alone, I fixated on Aiden more and more. I already knew where he lived. I figured this out months ago. I'd also figured out his routine. The guy was pretty predictable after all. I watched outside while his lights turned off for the night that Saturday. I entered his apartment with the spare key I had paid to have made by the sketchy maintenance guy. The sedatives I'd laced into Aiden's water jug were clearly working. He didn't stir as I walked into his room. I opened his phone. I knew he and Claire were having an affair long before the divorce. Shockingly, there weren't any messages between them during our marriage. That didn't mean anything, though. I could feel it in my bones that Claire still loved him. I began messaging Claire as Aiden. She quickly agreed to meet up with him that night. I knew it. He's the reason I lost Claire. Eventually, Aiden began to stir, making me uneasy. Claire looked shocked when she saw me get out of Aiden's truck, wearing his clothes. What the hell? She asked. Isn't this who you wanted tonight? I'm just being who you wanted all along, I responded. Where's Aiden? You're crazy, she shouted. I don't remember what happened next, or maybe I just blocked it out. All I remember is walking back from the pond with my clothes wet and my face and arms scratched and bloody. The officer snapped me back into reality, asking why I returned on Saturday. The thing is, I couldn't tell him. It was like I was in a trance, living a life that wasn't mine. The officer placed me under arrest. I still couldn't figure out why I went back. In an empty corner of the room, I saw her, Claire. She was dripping wet, her hair and clothes were dirty, and she had a creepy smile on her face. I stepped back, pointing, and the officer appeared confused. After I started screaming, I heard him call for backup. I was injected with something. My eyes became heavy, and I closed them. I could still see Claire with my eyes closed. I'm a police officer in the southern U.S., in a suburban department of about 100 sworn officers. I work in a college town. I've been on the job for about 10 years now. I was made sergeant 4 years ago, but at the time of this story, I was just 2 years on, working night shift patrol. I've been lucky that not a lot has affected me mentally during my career. I don't have kids. That's how it usually gets to you. You can build all the mental walls you want. but when you have an emotional connection with your kids and see something happening to them, the walls mean nothing. Anyway, this one stuck with me. Still makes my hair stand on end, especially when it rains. It was September, just after midnight. I get put on a call of shots fired. Now, normally, these calls turn out to be either fireworks or perhaps a car backfiring, but mostly fireworks. So unless we get multiple calls on it, a confirmed gunman or someone confirmed wounded, we just send one unit. That night, it was me. The shots fired were reported around a college football stadium. This was during football season, so there were a bunch of really big white tents set up all around the parking lots for tailgaters. I notified dispatch that I was on scene and started rolling through the parking lots, casting my spotlight here and there. It was raining pretty heavily, making it hard to see. About halfway through the lot, my spotlight illuminated the silhouette of a man sitting in a folding chair under one of those big tents. I pulled closer, lit him up, and notified dispatch that I was out with one in the parking lot. His back was to me. He appeared to be hunched forward, as if his elbows were on his knees and his head were leaning forward. I walked towards him and started calling out to him. I can't remember exactly what I said, but something like, "Hey man, are you okay? Have you heard anything strange? Can you come talk to me?" He didn't move or answer. As I drew closer, I lit him up with my flashlight. I then noticed the outline of a shotgun on the pavement next to him. Combined with his not answering and the nature of the call, it was enough for me to break leather and have dispatch hold the channel. I kept calling to him as I approached, asking him to show me his hands, etc. 30 feet, 20 feet, and 10 feet my handgun has a streamlight light on it, so I had it lit up. 6 feet under the tent with him. 5 feet, 4 feet. I close in on him and come around in front of him. Shotgun suicides are difficult. Often, if they put the barrel under their chin, the blast from the barrel will blow the gun out from under their chin before the shot ever hits them. There was a guy in my hometown who succeeded in a shotgun suicide, only because he did it in front of a pond. He put the barrel under his chin and pulled the trigger, only managed to blow his face off. The coroner said he probably ran around screaming through the hole that used to be his mouth before he drowned in the pond. This guy succeeded. He bled his head clean off. If you do this job long enough, you'll notice funny little details. His elbows were indeed resting on his knees. It was as though he blew his head off, set the shotgun on the ground next to him, and then leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees to think about what he'd done. About that time, I noticed that even though I was under the tent with him, it felt like it was still raining, and then I looked up. This story happened about 11 years ago. I was a senior in high school at the time, but it is the single most mind-boggling thing that I have ever experienced. It's also important to note that it happened in mid-December. I am from Iowa, and the winters here get cold at night. Like if you get stuck outside, you will die kind of cold. That, plus the snowfall, makes everything dead silent. You can hear anything and everything inside the house and even immediately outside of it. Well, me and my best friend were hanging out in my family's walkout basement, just having a boring winter night playing video games. We were also the only ones home. The reason it was just us is because my mother went from work straight to a bar to grab a few drinks with coworkers. So me and my friend thought it would be a good idea to break into the family wine and live a little. As we were sitting there, opening up the first bottle, I heard the door to the garage open and slam shut. I immediately started looking for places to hide the bottle. My friend then says, "I thought you said your mom was supposed to be out all night." "She was," I replied. I then heard a few heavy stomps and heard my mother yell out, "Meows and boo. Anyone home?" I yell back up the stairs. Yup. Just hanging out in the basement. I hear a few more steps move from the garage door towards the stairs, and she yells out again, "Can you come help me with something? I need you up here." I reply back while frantically trying to find a good place to hide the wine bottle. Yup, Give me just a minute." Then there was silence for about 20 seconds. "Anyone down there with you?" she yelled back in a more concerned, serious tone, in a voice that was slightly off of my mother's. This was the first thing that told me something wasn't right. Our family never cared if anyone was over, as our house was a very open house to all family and friends. And the voice was just wrong, like it sounded like my mother's. But it was missing something that I couldn't put my finger on. "Weirded out," I reply back. "Just Colton." After I yelled that back to her, I found a good place to hide the bottle and began walking up the steps to the next level. Now, as I was walking up the steps, I couldn't help but feel the overbearing silence of the house and the slight electric twinge that something wasn't right. When I got to the top of the steps, I looked over to where the door to the garage is, and also the kitchen right next to it, and it was pitch black. All the lights were off, and there was no moonlight shining through any windows. I walked over to the kitchen, yelling out, "Mom, where are you?" There was no reply, just silence and darkness. I feel the electric twinge turn into full needles, and my adrenaline is kicking in full force. I have to get out of here as fast as possible. My mother was not home. I run back down the stairs, grabbing my coat along the way. "What's wrong?" Colton says. "My mom's not home." I reply as fast as I can, looking for my truck keys. "What do you mean? You were just talking with her." I could see the confusion in his face. "There's no one home. We need to leave now." I took a few steps towards the back door that opens up to the yard, and then I saw my dog shaking on the couch, and my cat growling behind it. I couldn't leave them. I just knew that if we left, something would happen. "Are we leaving?" Colton said, still confused as all hell. "No, I can't leave them here alone. Something is really off. I'm going to call my mom and figure this out." I pull out my phone and call my mom. She picks up immediately. "Meows and boo. What's going on?" she answers. "Mom? Were you just home? I heard you yelling for me from the second level, and when I went up, you weren't there." I said it frantically, hoping that she was playing a joke. "No, I'm just leaving the bar. I wasn't feeling very well. Are you okay?" "What do you mean you heard me?" I fill her in on the whole story, and she rushes home. Colton and I stayed in the basement with the animals until she got home. But before she did, you could hear something up the stairs, not walking or sitting on things, but a pressure in the air, like a black hole was slowly moving from one room to the next. And the word that I would instinctively describe it as is hungry. When she got home, you could feel the thing leave just as quickly as it came, like an overbearing predatory presence had just flown away. We still have never figured out what the hell was going on. And this is just one story of many unexplainable things that have happened to us. But this is the easiest to write down and one that I was happy to be a witness to. My mother has passed away now, and I have moved away to Arizona. But whenever I go back to Iowa and I see Colton, he still gets creeped out by what has happened. I will never truly know what happened. But I know that whatever it was that had my mother's voice, it was evil. And it was hungry. And it was hungry. This is my first post and is a true story. I was living in a rural area of Oklahoma with my mother at a small lake house, and I was probably 10 or 11 at this time. One night I was sleeping in my room when I randomly and abruptly woke up for no reason. This was not normal for me, and I felt very uneasy. The only sound I could hear was my mother snoring in the next room on the couch. I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep, but my need to use the bathroom was growing more urgent. So I grudgingly forced myself to head that way. The bathroom is on the other side of the house, around a corner, past the kitchen, and finally down a long hallway on the right. So after I made the trip and finished my business, I flipped off the light switch and started heading back to bed. That's when I heard the distinct click of the light switch, and I saw the glow of the bathroom light in the hallway. Terrified, I slowly turned around just to witness the light in the bathroom start clicking on and off. Click, 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 click. Finally, it shut down completely. In the dark of the hallway, my eyes began to make out a white shape near the end of the hall. It was around my size and crouched to the floor. At this point, I'm frozen to the spot as my mind begins to realize that no one else is home, except for my mom and myself. Then the white shape began whispering in a quiet man's voice. "Help me." I remember wanting to scream for my mom, but I couldn't. And instead, I barely said no, before this thing started running at me on what sounded like all fours. I quickly ran through the kitchen and around the corner, before running to my sleeping mother and shaking her awake. I remember saying, "It's coming. It's coming," and my mother's eyes going from dazed to alert in an instant. She asked me what was going on, and I saw her eyes look over my shoulder before she screamed. Remembering her scream still makes my blood run cold. Never had I heard pure terror like that in my life, even to this day. She grabs me by the arms, pulls me into my room, and slams the door. She holds me in her arms with her back pressed against the door as we listen. It sounded like this thing was running around in circles in the kitchen. We could hear hands and feet slapping against the tile. The kitchen had a sliding glass door to the outside, which sounded like it was thrown open and then slammed. We sat there horrified until daybreak. I was sent to my grandmother's house in the next town for a while after that, and I never set foot in that house again. Years later, my mother said she went walking around the property after the incident and came across a small burial site with 3 headstones that each belonged to children from the early 1900s. It freaks me out because what I heard that night was a man's voice, but it was so unnatural. My mom still will not tell me what she saw behind me or what it was that made her scream. She tells me she's afraid it will know we're talking about it and come back. This is the first of many weird things that have happened in my life.